Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today was round 3 of Rilton Cup. I just finished my game and it was quite something. It was super interesting. Let's take a look at what happened. So in round 3 I faced Anna-Maja from Belgium. You can hear it probably from the pronunciation. And we've never actually played before, but I've seen her many times in international tournaments, especially Olympiad and European teams, as she's representing the Belgian national women's team. So I've never faced it, but yeah, when I was preparing, I saw that she had some really good results sometimes. So I knew that this was going to be a tough challenge, even though I am the higher rated player. So yeah, I saw that she plays most of the time e4, so that's what I prepared against, and I went for e6, the French. So after d4, d5, she went for e5. Recently, she went for the exchange variation most of the times as recent as the Olympiad, so that's what I'm mostly prepared for. She did not play the advanced variation that many times, and also I believe not super recently. So that's why I did not really prepare against this. I thought, well, if she's going to prepare against the French something, then I should be fine given my dozens of games that I played, dozens of experience that I got in the French, right? At least that's what I was hoping for. So I went for c5, c3, bishop d7, knight f3, knight c6, and after bishop d3, I went for rook c8. It is possible to take right away, but for some reason during the game I thought, yeah, I don't really want to take on d4 that easily. But I did think of, let's say, takes, and queen b6, and then asking my opponent the question, okay, what are you going to do about that pawn? I know there's some line where you sacrifice a pawn, but yeah, I just went kind of autopilot with rook c8, to be honest. So then short castle happened, and now I thought, okay, now is the time to take, because I essentially prepared the move knight b4. Now I do have to say that I believe recently some new line has appeared where rook e1 is possible. White sacrifices a pawn, but gets a lot of initiative. The development is going to be in white's favor. White will be ahead in development by a lot. And black doesn't really have much to go with other than being up a pawn, and that pawn is not really helpful in this case. So I believe recently Divya Deshmukh had a really interesting game at Olympiad in this, but I may be wrong, but I have a vague memory that she had a crushing game in this line. So yeah, anyway, this is, I think, the reason that my opponent spent about 15 minutes on this move, or maybe 20 minutes. She spent a lot of time on this move, and I figured that she's considering rook e1, but she ended up playing the move c takes d4. So I was really happy about that, because now I thought, okay, either queen b6 or knight b4 is really nice. But while she was spending time, I couldn't quite figure out which move I want to play, because both look really good. And yeah, it's a matter of taste, I guess, or what is most convenient. But I went for knight b4 in the end because I thought I want a pair of bishops. And I know that essentially taking the light-squared bishop is not helpful for my light-squared bishop, which is inside the pawn chain. So it may get tricky with that bishop on d7, because of knight c3, knight takes d3, queen takes d3, it is hard to see how this bishop comes back to life in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 moves, because it's kind of stuck there. And yeah, I really need to find a way to get some play without getting stuck, you know, with that bishop. So queen b6 is what I went for to prevent knight b5, if anything. Bishop d2, knight e7. And yeah, I wasn't sure after playing knight e7 if that was really what I wanted to go for, because I'm getting stuck here already. So I wanted to play bishop b4, but I thought, well, if bishop b4, white can just play, let's say, rook fc1, because my opponent wants to make sure that my opponent wants to play a3 next. So if I play knight e7, I thought a3, and I have to take on c3. And this bishop is not good, but it can become good, because maybe bishop b4 happens, and then this diagonal is really vulnerable in my position. And yeah, I didn't really know how to proceed here. It didn't feel great. It didn't feel great at all. So that's why I thought, okay, I cannot really get the bishop out so soon. By the way, if I take on b2, my opponent will play rook fb1 or rook ab1, and my queen is kind of getting stuck, as well as rook takes b7 and yeah, I'm gonna get stuck very soon with my development. So this is very unpleasant. And that's why I went for knight e7 first. But after rook fe1, my opponent is essentially not allowing me to play knight f5. Because if I play knight f5, I was thinking there are some knight takes d5 ideas with e takes d5, e6, and after bishop takes e6, queen takes f5. The computer thinks it's equal, but during the game I thought this was really bad, or at least that I shouldn't allow this whatsoever because I'm stuck with this bishop on e6, which is not great, and my opponent is getting more and more play. I do have the pair of bishops, but yeah, I don't know. I don't really know how to feel about this. So that's why I cannot play knight f5. If I play knight g6, the knight is not doing anything there and my opponent will start attacking with h4. And essentially, I have to keep an eye on knight takes d5 at all times. As soon as I move the knight takes d5 becomes a real threat. So that's why I decided to play a5 because I also thought, well, I want to take on b2, so what about bishop c6? That was the next thought. So I spent about 10 minutes on this move because I was really trying to figure out what can I actually do? Like, which move can I make without losing material? And bishop c6 is what I considered as well to take on b2. But after bishop c6, what I didn't like is that my opponent has moved b4. Perhaps. Because after takes, I thought there's some knight takes d5, and I thought this was really unpleasant. Yeah, I didn't like this whatsoever. There's some nasty discovery attacks here. And my queen is stranded here. My queen is not supposed to be here. So b4 is a very typical move in the advanced French where white is ready to give up the pawn and is most likely getting it back. But if white is not getting it back, then white gets a lot of play instead. So that's why I thought, okay, I also cannot play bishop c6. So I guess we'll just settle with a5 to prevent b4. Rook ac1, a4. I don't really have any other plan than trying to get some space on the queen side here. Knight g5, h6. I was ready to face knight g5 because I thought, yeah, I'm not really afraid of this. My opponent doesn't really have sacrifices, and I thought, well, if knight h7, I am actually okay to give up the dark square bishop. It is one of the stronger pieces of black in the French, but it has never been moved. So my opponent basically spent 1, 2, 3, 4 moves to get that bishop. So I call that a win. The funny thing here is that apparently rook takes h7 is possible. I did consider this, but I thought, why? Why would I do this? But black gets a lot of play. This queen is kind of stuck here. You can retreat, I guess, but I guess it's safe to say that black has some nice compensation for the exchange. But is it really worth it to sacrifice the exchange? I really wonder if anyone would play this, like if GMs would play this, because yeah, I am not interested in that. I thought I want to play rook c4. And the funny thing is that there are moves such as knight e4 around the corner. In this very case, I can just take, and after queen takes c4, rook takes h7. But it can get pretty tricky if knight e4 is possible at some point. So yeah, I wasn't really sure how to deal with it yet. I was thinking of knight f5, but that causes some issues because knight takes f8, and suddenly it's not so clear what black can do here because this knight is super strong. I have to take on c1. I guess king takes f8 also works, but then rook takes c4. Yeah, that loses a pawn. So rook takes c1, and then rook takes c1, king takes f8, and yeah, this knight can move, let's say knight c5, and white is a really nice position, so I don't really like that at all. And yeah, then my point was for knight takes f8 right away. I think that makes perfect sense. King takes f8, bishop e3. Here I thought actually that my opponent would play knight e2. I thought it was a stronger move because if I take on b2, rook takes c4, I wasn't entirely sure what I would go for here, but I thought, well, maybe I'll be fine here because queen takes c4. Oh, actually, that drops a piece, so the queen has to move. Yeah, it feels like the better version, at least, because that knight should not stay on c3. But yeah, I like this position for white a bit more. Oh, this, by the way, rook b1. I almost forgot about this. Rook b1, queen c2, queen takes, I thought. Apparently that's not so great, but this is what I was thinking about, and my opponent gets some activity, and yeah, I have to be careful of moves such as bishop b4, because this diagonal, once again, very scary. So I thought knight e2 was going to be played, but then my opponent went for bishop e3, and I thought, wait, am I not just winning that pawn on b2? It's not like I'm winning, but taking a pawn without losing material or without facing consequences feels pretty good. So rook c2, queen b6, back, a3. I thought that was both an annoying move, but also a helpful move, because in some lines, the white queen can go to a3, and once again, this diagonal, very annoying to deal with. So I thought that at any moment, queen a3 would be really annoying in the next couple of moves. So by playing a3, my opponent is not able to play queen a3 anymore. But after a3, suddenly I'm not able to play a3 myself, and also my opponent's planning to play knight a2, knight b4, and then knight got a really strong square all of a sudden. So it's a little bit annoying to deal with that. But at the same time, b3 now is weakened, which I didn't make use of yet, because I thought, okay, I have to start developing my pieces, because this is doing absolutely nothing here on the king side. So knight to f5, and rook b1, queen c6, because if I play queen c7, that's still fine, but my idea is to play king e7. And if I play, let's say this h3, king e7, it's still fine, but I thought, why should I allow tactics such as queen takes f5 or knight takes d5? I don't know. In this case, queen takes f5 is the one that doesn't, lose material. But I thought that this was annoying, but apparently rook takes c2 is just hanging the rook there. But yeah, perhaps in some other position it could be really dangerous, so I thought, let's just play queen c6, because it's fine. My opponent cannot play knight b5 anyway, so it's fine. This knight is pinned, by the way. So rook bb2, king e7, now I can safely play king e7 without having to worry about anything. Knight a2, and I thought this was pretty annoying. So my opponent is, at this point, very low on the clock, and I had a time advantage. Surprise, surprise, miracles do happen. But yeah, I was trying as much as I could to stay ahead on the clock, because as we know how important that is. And yeah, I have a better position. I'm fully aware that I should be better here, but how do you actually continue? So I play rook c8, knight b4, queen b5, knight a2. My opponent is just moving the knight back and forth, right? Which makes perfect sense. Like, I have to prove that I'm actually winning. And it was a little bit frustrating that no tactics really worked, because my opponent is also defending the back rank really well. So I don't have rook takes c2, because that just loses the queen. So queen a6, I retreat, rook takes c4, and here I have a tough task. I was just glancing over what Engine is recommending here. So I can capture on c4 in 3 different ways. And okay, I was going to say that it turns out that I chose the worst one, but it's not that bad. It's kind of the same evaluation. But anyway, apparently all of the captures are good enough, but it turns out that d takes c4 is the best one. I would not say so, because it doesn't really feel like it helps, because the pawns are not really able to move forward. Knight b4 comes in, and I have a hard time navigating with my pieces. Yes, this diagonal opens up, but I couldn't really find something there, because queen c3, queen b4, the dark squares are very weak. So I thought, I don't really want to do this. I want to keep the control in my hands with queen takes c4, queen takes, well, if queen takes c4, then obviously, let me put the most on board. Rook takes c4, rook takes b7, I take on d4, and I'm very happy in this endgame. I should be winning this one. So that's why queen d1, my opponent's of course trying to hold on to the queen, because the queen can be really dangerous. Rook c7, g4. This was really annoying, actually, because my knight has only 2 squares, basically. And if I go knight h4, there may be moves such as g5. And I thought, oh, that's so annoying. I can't play knight f5, I guess, but yeah, it's a little bit annoying to deal with that, and I don't really want to allow my opponent's counterplay, so I thought I have to take on e3. This is the one capture that I don't want to make, because if I take on e3, which I did, I'm helping my opponent, right? Because that bishop is so bad, and I'm trading my good knight for that bad bishop. F takes e3, my opponent doesn't have back rank issues anymore, but in the long term, these pawns can become really weak. So that's what I have going for myself here, but yeah, it's still really difficult, because this bishop is, once again, not the greatest. But wait for it. It's gonna come back to life with bishop e5, starting with that. So my opponent cannot really play queen d2 because that's checkmate. So keep in mind that that is the threat, and the queen cannot just move anywhere, which is really nice. Queen b1, of course, attacking that bishop. I play bishop a6, queen e1. So here I was finally able to start infiltrating. I still played king e8 first because I thought, let's put the king into a safe square because queen b4 isn't coming, perhaps. I don't know. It's not something that I should be afraid of, but I thought, let's just be safe. Or queen h4, also really annoying check. I don't know. Terrifying moves. So king f2, and now I played queen d3 because now I have rook c2, and after knight b4, queen takes a3. And now that the king is on f2, knight takes a6 is not dangerous anymore for me because I take on b2 with check. Otherwise, b takes a6 and rook b8 check, and I don't know what's happening there. So that's why it's convenient that the king is on f2 for me. So queen b1 is what my opponent played, bishop c4, queen c2. It's crazy how my queen is stuck here, which is really scary, especially in time trial. I only had 30 seconds at this point, and it's very scary. Well, maybe I had like 1 or 2 minutes, but yeah, it was very scary. King d7, rook b1, bishop b3. But as soon as this was on the board, I thought, okay, queen d2, rook c4, game over, because I'm attacking that knight on b4. The knight has to move. My opponent went for knight takes d5 to try to complicate matters, and I just have rook c2. So if the knight moves, rook c2, which is what I played, queen takes c2, bishop takes c2, rook takes b7, king c6, takes, and this is when my opponent resigned because my opponent doesn't have tricks any longer. And this is how I won my first game in a tournament. It feels really good to finally win a game. It felt pretty difficult. It felt more difficult than it should have been. Looking at the game back now, it's like I was thinking about so many different things and suffering so much to try to come up with plans. And when you look at the game now, it feels all so simple. It feels so easy. It feels like I shouldn't have been suffering at all. But yeah, during the game, it's a different story. And I guess it's the nature of the advanced French too, right? Because both sides are struggling with their space and pieces that don't really have much mobility. So yeah, I guess it's just the nature of the opening that it's really difficult to improve your position in this opening. So yeah, that was my game in round 3. I'm super happy. I'm finally on 1 point. And I think this win makes up for the 2 losses, so that's good. And now we continue to the next round. So I have no idea who I'm playing next, so wish me luck. And thanks for watching, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Bye!